He laughed when I told him I was hurt by the proposal, and what happened next left me speechless. My fiancé laughed at me. Right in my face, mid-sentence, while I was pouring my heart out about something that had genuinely been eating me alive for days. And you know what? That laugh completely changed everything. I had been dreading this conversation so much. I had rehearsed it in my head 100 times, worried about his reaction, worried about ruining the happiness of a moment that was supposed to be one of the best of our lives. I had played out every possible version of how it might go, the version where he gets defensive, the version where he goes quiet and distant, the version where he says he understands but you can tell by the look on his face that he does not really. I had steeled myself for all of it. And then he just laughed. So let me take you back to where this all started, because if you missed the original post, you need the context to really appreciate how beautifully this whole thing resolved. Our original poster, a 27-year-old woman, had just gotten engaged to her 29-year-old fiancé. And on paper, this should have been pure joy. She was engaged to someone she loved, stepping into a new chapter of her life, surrounded by all the warmth and excitement that a fresh engagement brings. The kind of happiness that makes your phone blow up with notifications and makes you look down at your hand every few minutes just to confirm it is real. And yet something was gnawing at her. Something small and persistent and inconvenient, sitting just beneath the surface of all that joy. Something she could not shake no matter how hard she tried to talk herself out of it. The proposal itself came with a complication. She had been the one to plan the evening. She had organized the whole event, put genuine thought and energy and care into building a wonderful night for both of them. She had made reservations, made decisions, put herself into the shape of the evening from the ground up. And then at the end of it, he proposed. On the surface you might think, well, that is sweet, he found the perfect moment. But she had actually told him specifically, before the night happened, that she did not want her proposal tied to another special occasion. She wanted it to stand on its own, clean and separate and entirely its own memory. She wanted it to be about them and only them, not folded into something else, not borrowing its meaning from another event. That was not an unreasonable thing to want. That was a clear, simple, personal request from someone who had thought about what would make her feel celebrated. And here is the other layer on top of that. The event he chose to propose at was held close to her birthday. Not on her actual birthday, but close enough that it still felt tangled up with it in her mind. So she now had an engagement that felt like it had been hitched to two things she had asked to keep separate. Her own plans for the evening and her birthday. That is a lot to sit with when you are supposed to be floating on cloud 9. Instead of having one bright, singular memory to hold on to, the whole thing felt layered and complicated in a way that made it hard to just be happy without a small asterisk following the feeling around. Now here is what made this situation genuinely difficult. She was not dealing with a bad partner. She was not dealing with someone who had been careless or dismissive, someone with a pattern of not listening or making her feel unimportant. She was dealing with someone she loved deeply, someone she was genuinely excited to build a life with, and she still felt this quiet disappointment living inside her chest like a stone she could not put down. And that is actually one of the harder emotional situations to navigate because there is no villain to be angry at. There is no clear wrongdoing to point to. There is just this feeling, soft but persistent, that does not have anywhere obvious to go and does not respond to logic the way you wish it would. So she did what a lot of us do when we feel something uncomfortable about someone we love. She sat on it. She turned it over in her mind during quiet moments, in the car, right before sleep, in the spaces between conversations. She wrestled with it alone, not because she wanted to be alone with it, but because she could not yet figure out how to hand it to someone else. She wondered whether she was being ungrateful or irrational. She questioned whether this was even worth bringing up at all, whether the right move was just to bury it, move on, and let the overwhelming happiness of the engagement slowly cover it over like snow over a sidewalk. That internal debate is so real and so exhausting. Because on one side your brain is saying, this is your engagement, you only get one, and this feeling matters and deserves to be acknowledged. And on the other side your brain is saying, he loves you, he meant well, he was trying to make you happy in the only way he knew how in that moment. Do not make this a whole thing. Do not be the person who turns a proposal into a grievance. And you end up just spinning in that cycle going nowhere, too guilty to speak and too uncomfortable to stay quiet. She posted about it and the responses came flooding in. Thousands of people weighing in on whether she should tell him, how she should tell him, what it might mean about their communication as a couple going forward. And the overwhelming consensus was, tell him. Do it gently but do it honestly, because carrying this quietly into a marriage is not the foundation anyone wants. So she prepared herself. She thought carefully about how to frame it, turning the words over until they felt honest but not accusatory. She decided to lead with love, to open with how much the engagement and the relationship meant to her, to make sure he heard her excitement for their future before she got into the part that had been sitting uncomfortably in her chest. She wanted him to know that she was not coming to him with a complaint but with the truth, and that the only reason she was saying it at all was because she trusted him enough to be vulnerable in front of him. It was a thoughtful, mature, emotionally intelligent approach. And then she sat him down and started talking. She told him how excited she was to be engaged, how much marrying him meant to her, how thrilled she was for everything ahead. And then she took a breath and told him the truth. She told him that she had been a little disappointed that the proposal was tied to the event she had planned herself, and that she had specifically asked for it not to be connected to another special occasion, and that while she knew he had not meant anything hurtful by it, she needed to say it out loud so she could truly move past it. And that is when he laughed. Not a dismissive laugh. Not a roll of the eyes. Not the kind of laugh that shuts someone down or makes them feel foolish for having said something. Not the laugh that would have confirmed every worst-case scenario she had been rehearsing. A genuine, warm, relieved laugh. The kind that comes out of someone who has been quietly watching the person they love carrying a weight and finally seeing it set down. Because he had been watching her prepare for this conversation with all the gravity of someone about to deliver devastating news, building herself up to it the way you build yourself up to something that might hurt. And when she finally said what was on her mind, his reaction was essentially, "Oh, thank goodness, that is all it is, I completely understand." He told her that his thinking behind the timing was actually rooted in how much he loved watching her excitement about the event. She had been so energized for the night, so enthusiastic about everything she had planned and put together, practically glowing with anticipation, that he thought it would be the perfect ending to a perfect evening that she herself had built from the ground up. He saw it as a beautiful conclusion to something she loved, a way of weaving the proposal into a memory that was already uniquely hers. He was trying to add to something, not overshadow it. But he also acknowledged, right there in the conversation without flinching or hedging, that he completely understood how she could see it differently. That piggybacking off her own planning was a fair and legitimate rid of the situation, and he did not dismiss that for a single second. On the birthday question, he explained that since the event was actually 2 days before her real birthday, and there was already a separate family party planned for the actual day, he had genuinely thought it was far enough removed to stand on its own. But he said it out loud and he heard it and he admitted, right there, that in hindsight he could have worked out himself that it still counted as connected to her birthday in the way that mattered to her. And he apologized. Genuinely, without qualification, without the little addendum people sometimes attach to apologies that quietly takes the apology back. He also gave her a reason she had not fully known about. They have weddings coming up in June, July, August and September, 3 of which involve travel. He did not want the proposal to feel squeezed and rushed between a series of other people's milestones, just another pin on a busy calendar. He wanted it to have space around it, room to breathe and be remembered on its own terms. And so when the moment felt right that evening, when the night was warm and she was happy and everything felt full, he took it. Okay, I need to say something here. He actually thought this through. Like, extensively. Then the conversation went somewhere even better. He walked her through all the other proposal ideas he had been sitting on and quietly turning over in his mind. Some she had already heard hints of, others were completely new to her, little glimpses into the version of events that almost happened. And just hearing all of that, hearing the thought and care and creativity he had poured into imagining different ways to ask her to marry him, filled her up in a way she had not expected and could not have predicted. It reframed everything. It took the proposal from something that felt slightly tangled and complicated and turned it into proof of how much he had genuinely, persistently, lovingly wanted to get it right. He also asked her to make him a promise. To bring things up straight away in the future, even when it feels uncomfortable, even when she is worried about hurting his feelings or starting something difficult. And he said something that is honestly relationship wisdom worth writing down. He told her that protecting his feelings is not her job. Finding solutions together is their job. And then, because this man clearly understands how to make things right in a way that actually sticks, he offered something concrete. For their upcoming anniversary, he is going to plan and execute one of those activity ideas on his own so they can experience it as a regular couple, completely free from any proposal pressure or significance. So she gets the thing she originally wanted, just in a different form and at a different time, with all the weight of expectation lifted off it. She ended her update by saying that the weight she had been carrying is just gone. And you can feel that in how she wrote it. The relief is palpable. Let me be very clear about what this story actually is, because I think it is easy to focus on the conflict and miss the bigger picture. This is a story about a woman who had a completely legitimate feeling, sat with it honestly, trusted her partner enough to be vulnerable, and found out that her partner was someone worth trusting. That is not a small thing. That is the whole thing. A lot of people would have stayed silent. A lot of people would have convinced themselves that bringing it up was too risky, too ungrateful, too much trouble. And the feeling would have calcified quietly inside the relationship, one of many small unspoken disappointments that pile up over years until the weight becomes unbearable and nobody can remember where it started. She chose differently. And her fiancé showed up exactly the way a partner should. He listened, he explained without deflecting, he apologized without making excuses, and he made a concrete gesture to actually address the root of what she had felt. That is not a lucky outcome. That is the result of two people who have genuinely built something worth having. These two are going to be just fine. And I mean that with full conviction. She slept with someone else hours before agreeing to be exclusive and he just found out the full truth. 9:39 p.m. She told him she wanted to be with him, looked him right in the eye, and what she did not say in that moment changed absolutely everything. He found that part out later. And once he did, he could not unfind it. This story starts with a guy who thought he was just processing something uncomfortable about the timing of an exclusivity conversation. He had posted online because he was going in circles in his head, looking for perspective on whether he was overreacting to something his girlfriend had told him. She had slept with someone else, hours before coming to his apartment and agreeing to be exclusive with him. Not days before. Hours. He had written the post late at night, probably sitting with his phone in a dim room, replaying the timeline over and over the way you do when something will not settle no matter how many angles you look at it from. He was not raging. He was not dramatic. He was genuinely trying to be fair to her and fair to himself at the same time, and that tension was eating him alive. Now before we go further, he wants you to know he is not completely naive about how these things work. The conversation about exclusivity had not happened yet when that night went down. Technically speaking, nobody had made any promises. He knew that. He had sat with that context while trying to decide how he felt, turning it over quietly the way a reasonable person does when they are trying not to react from the gut alone. And there were plenty of people in the comments of his original post who told him, look, until the conversation happens, everyone is technically free to do what they want. Some of those comments probably gave him a brief moment of relief. A doorway he could walk through and let the whole thing go. But he could not walk through it. And the reason he could not became clear pretty quickly. But there was a detail living inside his original post that he had mentioned but not fully examined yet. A detail that a few sharp commenters had flagged. A detail that, when he finally sat down and asked her about it directly, answered just about everything. Before they slept together that night, she had asked the other guy whether he saw any future between them. Not as a condition. Not as a deal-breaker. Just as a question, apparently to check where his head was at. Picture that moment. She is with someone else, and she stops to ask that question. She is not swept away. She is not acting without thinking. She is pausing, mid-situation, and taking a reading. The guy said no. He told her he was only looking for something casual. There was no softening of it, no ambiguity, just a clear and honest no. And with that answer on the table, she slept with him anyway. Then she got in her car, drove to her boyfriend's apartment, and told him she wanted to be exclusive. Think about what that drive must have looked like. The radio may be on. The city passing outside the window. Whatever she was thinking or feeling on that drive, she arrived at his door and she smiled and she said the words. Stop. Just stop for a second and really sit with that sequence. She went to another man, asked him if he wanted a future with her, got told no, and then came to her boyfriend and offered him the thing the other guy had just declined. That is the full picture. That is what he was actually dealing with. He is careful to say that on paper, nothing about the core timeline changes. She still came back. She still chose him. She still showed up at his door and made a commitment. And he is not interested in painting himself as some underdog and the other guy as some intimidating rival. He describes himself as a confident person, and from reading everything he has written, that reads as true. This was not about insecurity in the conventional sense. He was not sitting there cataloging ways the other guy was better looking or more successful. That was not the wound. It was about what the sequence meant. It was about what it revealed about the internal logic of how she arrived at choosing him that night. She had not spent the day thinking about him and wanting to be with him and deciding to make it official. She had spent part of that day or evening with someone else, asked whether that someone else wanted more, been told no, and then driven to his apartment. The exclusivity conversation, the one that probably felt meaningful and significant and full of warmth when it was happening, now had a before attached to it that she had never volunteered. He had to find that out sideways, through a comment thread, from strangers on the internet who read more carefully than he had in that first days of confusion. He describes it as going from feeling like someone she desired to feeling like a second-place trophy. And honestly, that framing is not dramatic. That framing is exactly accurate. Because what the sequence describes is not a woman who chose him. It describes a woman who accepted her options in order. I am not saying she is a villain. He does not say that either. But that distinction matters. The month after he posted was a cycle he describes with real clarity. They would argue about it, and those arguments probably had the particular exhaustion of conversations where both people are trying to be understood and neither person fully can be. Then they would work through it, reach something that felt like genuine understanding and resolution, feel the relief of solid ground under their feet again, and then some small random thing would bring it back to the surface and they would be standing at zero again. A song. A passing comment. A pause that lasted a half-second too long. That pattern alone tells you a lot. Because when something is truly resolved in a relationship, it does not keep resurfacing. It resurfacing that consistently means it was never fully resolved for either of them, just temporarily covered over, like pressing a bandage over something that never actually closed. He ended the relationship about a month after that original post. And he sat with the uncertainty of that decision for a while, not because he missed her in a way that felt like longing, but because he worried he had let some insecure part of himself destroy a 2-year relationship over something that was objectively in a gray area. 2 years is not nothing. 2 years is inside jokes and shared playlists and knowing how someone takes their coffee and feeling genuinely safe with another person. He has had genuinely bad relationships before. This one was not that. She was not a bad girlfriend. The relationship was not toxic. And sometimes leaving something that is not bad but is also not right is actually the harder call to make than leaving something obviously broken. The broken things almost make the decision for you. The quietly wrong things ask you to do all the work yourself. He has been going through the motions since the breakup. Numb in a way he describes as not worrying but just present and quiet, like the volume on everything has been turned down a few notches. Not collapsed. Not undone. Just still. He has been through hard breakups before and he knows what the other side of one looks like, and that knowledge is clearly keeping him grounded. He ended his post with one line that has stayed with me since I read it. He said he just wants to be someone's first choice. And he hopes that is out there somewhere. Here is my verdict and I am not going to soften it. He made the right call. Not because she was a bad person, not because what she did was some monstrous betrayal, but because the thing he found out revealed a fundamental difference in how they both understood what commitment means and when it starts to matter. She did not think it was a big deal. He did. And neither of them is wrong exactly, but they are genuinely incompatible in that place, and that incompatibility was never going to quietly disappear. The question she asked the other man before sleeping with him is the thing that makes this genuinely hard to dismiss. Because that question reveals intent. She was not someone who got swept up in a moment and acted impulsively. She was someone who paused, asked a clarifying question, received an answer, and then made a choice. That is not thoughtlessness. That is a considered decision. And the considered decision was to sleep with someone who had just told her he was not interested in a future, and then go offer that future to someone else. He had every right to feel the way he felt. What he is walking away from is not just a relationship. He is walking away from a version of himself that was willing to stay somewhere he did not truly feel chosen. And that takes a kind of self-respect that a lot of people never find. He knows what he wants. He wants to be someone's first choice, not someone's best available option. That is not too much to ask. That is the bare minimum of what love should feel like. And I genuinely believe it is out there for him. Drop a comment below telling me which story hit harder for you, the engagement that turned into a masterclass in communication, or the guy who finally admitted he just wanted to be someone's first choice. If either of these got to you, hit the like button and subscribe because there is a lot more where this came from.